Uh-oh.
Okay, we'll start with this. What is our last look? Our last look at a fight I've talked about many times in many videos. The Sky Nicholson versus Raven Chapman fight.
Why do I think Raven wins?
Sky Nicholson seems to be the favorite with so many people. People on the ground and the bookies, the odds makers. Why am I going with Raven? So much of what Sky Nicholson relies on is having the room, the real estate, and the time to get off her punches, to be able to create space, and she's been able to do that against a lot of slow-footed fighters who just can't keep up with her and can't keep on her. That's where I think Raven is different.
Sky hasn't had to really work under pressure, a whole lot of pressure.
The only time I've ever seen Sky under any kind of pressure was with Spain's own Tania Alvarez, a very raw, rugged, rough around the edges fighter that still needed a lot of development.
Saw a glimpse of what I'm talking about in that fight. That even though Tania's rough around the edges, she's doing some of what she's supposed to do. Stay with Sky, stay on her. Don't give her the room and don't give her the time to set up her counters, set up her punches.
Force her to work so she can burn through her energy reserves that much faster. Now, I think Raven can do a better job of that. Staying with Sky, staying on her.
Sky mostly throws straight punches and looping punches.
From long range, she has yet to show any semblance of inside game and in-fighting combination punching.
That's more Raven's area of expertise.
So what I'm thinking is that Raven Chapman will have more foot speed than any fighter that Sky has fought so far, with more aggression
than any fighter Sky's fought so far.
It will be harder to shake and bake Raven Chapman because she's not walking on quicksand. She's fast on her feet too, coming forward.
Now, even though Sky Nicholson's got those long levers, she's the longer, lankier fighter of the two. She's really only throwing 1 and 2 punches at a time.
And a lot of the time it's against girls that have very poor defense, very poor movement, where Raven Chapman characteristically exhibits level changes while coming forward.
Very good movement.
Coming in at a slight crouch, bending at the waist and bending at the knees, shooting a double jab or a triple jab as she closes the distance to keep her opponent's guns holstered. There's not much chance that Sky Nicholson is going to plant her feet and trade with Raven Chapman. As she's doing this, Sky's going to stay on her toes and stay on the move.
The moment that Raven gets close enough to let go of a salvo of punches on Sky, she will.
Not talking about just 1 and 2 punches, we're talking about 3 and 4 punches, 5 punches. Things could get scrappy.
And Sky is either going to resort to holding, tying up Raven Chapman, or just moving out the way altogether.
Creating space. Do that too many times in a round, too many times in a fight, and you end up giving the fight away because you can't hold your ground. After a while, it gives off the impression that you're being bullied, that you're being pushed around. You can't assert yourself, and for what is already an economic fighter in Sky Nicholson that doesn't throw that many combinations to begin with.
Against slower fighters.
Against the more consistent, persistent fighter. She's going to be on her bike that much longer. That's what I think. It will be harder for Sky to get her punches out because Raven's not going to stop coming after her. She can't sit in one spot for too long.
No.
I think it will be challenging for Sky to get off her punches and land them because Raven isn't propped up like a scarecrow Unlike so many of those girls that Sky fought, chin in the air, barreling forward.
Raven comes in at an angle.
Unlike so many of those girls that Sky fought that looked like they were walking on quicksand.
Raven's got foot speed, head movement, level changes.
And that's what makes this fight different. It's not that I'm expecting Raven to brutalize Sky Nicholson. It's that I'm expecting Sky to spend so much time on the move, she's not going to get a whole lot done. It's a thin line between creating space and retreating, and it's open to the interpretation of the judges. This is not a matchroom show. Consideration that Sky normally gets for getting out of the way of punches and moving around, she may not get in Saudi.
While not throwing that many punches herself.
Raven's aggression may be what gets rewarded if Sky spends too much time on the move and not enough time landing punches. She already doesn't throw that many. The opponent's coming in hot. They're throwing punches and bunches. Sky definitely ain't gonna stand in one spot.
I'm thinking Raven Chapman on points due to activity and aggression or a draw.
Raven Chapman, I think, can push Sky in a way that she hasn't been pushed before, because it's true what she said at the press conference. A lot of those girls they picked for Sky, they picked them because they were slow, because they had poor defense, or because they weren't as long and limber, as athletic as Sky.
She could box them all up comfortably from the outside, but Raven's speciality is getting on the inside.
I like Raven to win the fight.
What about the draw?
Draw is possible if neither fighter is having it all their way, to where Sky is moving, she's creating space, but she's not landing, but Raven's not landing either, though still keeping Sky on the run, on the move.
Draw is possible.
I expect that Raven will push Sky harder than she's ever been pushed, because she brings more to the table than anybody Sky's fought. And while Sky might be high on a sparring session that they had some time ago, sparring ain't fighting.
So I've got Raven.
In men's middleweight news, you may have heard 2 or 3 days ago that Janibek versus Hamza Sheeraz has been ordered by the WBO. They went from asking Janibek to show cause why he should remain WBO champion to ordering him to defend his champion status. The WBO has called for negotiations between unified middleweight champion Janibek and Hamza Sheeraz to begin. The two teams have 15 days until October 23rd to reach an agreement, or the fight will be sent to purse bid. According to a letter the WBO issued on Tuesday, they don't necessarily need to wait to reach an agreement. Either can request a purse bid before then. The minimum bid for the fight is $200,000. Alimkhanalai, 16-0 with 11 KOs, a 31-year-old Kazakh living in Oxnard, California, recently defended his IBF and WBO titles with a 9th-round TKO of Andrei Mikhailiovic in Australia, which we talked about. Sheeraz, 21-0 with 17 KOs, a 25-year-old from London, has stood out as the division's top prospect and looks to be a bona fide contender in a 160-pound scene that is otherwise lacking depth. In September, he impressively stopped Tyler Denny in 2 rounds on the undercard of Joshua versus Dubois, and before that, he stopped the then unbeaten Ammo Williams on the Matchroom versus Queensbury show. Sheeraz is ready to step up. He's ranked number 1 by the WBO as well as the WBC, whose title holder is Carlos Adames, as reported by The Ring. Sheeraz won the EBU middleweight belt with that win over Denny and has since been ordered to defend it against Denzel Bentley. So what is he going to do? Is he going to take his shot at the big time with Janibek, or is he going to stay domestic with Denzel?
I like either fight.
I don't mind a Denzel Bentley fight as a prelude to the Janibek fight, because Denzel would service as a common opponent between them. It's good build-up for a Janibek fight, but they can skip the foreplay and get to the main course. They can shoot for Janibek straight away. Though Janibek Alimkhanalai himself seems to have reservations as to whether or not Hamza will take his shot, he took to his social media earlier today asking, "Question for you guys. Do you really think Hamza will agree to fight me? I'm not sure he will fight me. Let's see what they decide. I'm ready. You guys know that I'm always ready." There was a story reported 1 or 2 weeks ago from a good number of boxing scribes, Jake Donovan, Kevin Ioli, and Dan Rafael, all saying that Janibek Alimkhanalai was offered a Hamza Sheeraz fight for 7 figures, on the low end of 7 figures, and he rejected it. Janibek Alimkhanalai denied that.
He said it wasn't true.
But then why would 3 separate boxing scribes all be saying the same thing? Dan Rafael stated that it wasn't necessarily Janibek that turned it down, it was his promoter. And who promotes Janibek? Top Rank promotes Janibek, so why would Top Rank have rejected that offer?
Because he still had a mandatory to satisfy. If that offer to fight Hamza came down in between the time the Mikhailovic fight was postponed and the time it was rescheduled, then he wasn't at liberty to accept it. Not without costing him the IBF title.
Then why is he saying it's false? Why is he saying that's not true?
Because they probably didn't tell him about it. It probably didn't get any further than a phone conversation, a phone call.
So now it's Hamza Sheeraz that's on the spot. He can go the local route, fight Denzel Bentley en route to Janibek Alimkhanuly, or he can skip the foreplay and fight Janibek straight away.
Janibek doesn't think he's gonna do it.
So the tables have turned. The guy who was supposedly ducking Hamza Sheeraz might get ducked. We'll see. If he does, WBC champion Carlos Adames says, make it happen. Let's do it. If your team aren't sure about Hamza, let's make your dream.
I agree.
If for whatever reason Hamza doesn't want to fight Janibek yet, I'm all for a unification match. This division needs one.
Needs some.
As it pertains to a Hamza Sheeraz versus Janibek fight, Hamza Sheeraz brings a lot of height, a lot of length, and a lot of strength to the table.
Strong.
And for his generous physical dimensions, I don't get the sense that Hamza's struggling to get to 160 like Janibek might be struggling to get to 160. Remember, the reason the Mikhailovic fight got postponed is because he collapsed due to dehydration.
Right?
In a fight, you saw that Andre was crowding him, pushing him back. Even though Janibek looked physically bigger than Andre Mikhailovic, there were times where Andre seemed like he was physically stronger. The way he's just crowding Janibek mid-range to inside and pushing him back. Janibek struggling to create space to get punches off.
What's your point?
If Janibek is struggling to get to 160, that could affect his punch resistance. Hamza is a very strong puncher. Saw what he did to unbeaten Ammo Williams. You saw what he did to Tyler Denny. I do question how well Hamza can take a shot. I do question his chin as well, but I don't question his power. He's got power. Serious power. Now it's a question of whether or not he feels ready for this fight. Is he ready to take this fight? Is he ready to fight for not one, but 2 alphabet titles? Because the opportunity is there.
He wants it.
If he doesn't, Carlos is throwing his name into the hat. They've got more backstory, more history, Carlos and Janibek. They've been going back and forth like this for something like a year, 2 years.
Have at him.
So here's where it gets tricky. Top Rank didn't put up a lot of money for Janibek's last fight. They lost the rights to it to No Limit Promotions. They didn't get beat out by much because they didn't put up much.
Just $350,000.
Do you think that Carlos Adames is going to unify titles with Janibek Alimkhanuly for anything less than $1 million?
I'm not saying he deserves it. I'm saying that's likely what he's looking for. Something in that neighborhood.
It's a PBC guy. We saw another PBC fighter, PBC champion, in a Montestanionis say that $1.7 million for a unification match with Boots was not enough money. That's how one PBC guy felt. How does this one feel?
Wait, so what's a Montestanionis expect? In excess of $2 million?
Nobody's gonna give him that. What does Carlos expect for a fight with Janibek? An arm and a leg, I've no doubts.
And a foot.
It's sure. For the optics, he's throwing his name into the hat, but what kind of money is he actually expecting for the fight? Because Carlos Adames versus Janibek Alimkhanuly, good fight that it might be, it's not a big money fight.
That's not a $4 million fight. That's not a $5 million fight. In fact, the only hope I think that fight has of getting made is if Turkey pays for it. Because Top Rank ain't gonna bust their budget to do it, and the PBC won't even make a play.
They ain't gonna put up no money for that fight.
Carlos is happy to sit on that belt and hold it hostage while staying on PBC Island, while staying over there. All the while, there's not a lot going on over there. If he's really serious about unifying, he should probably change his decorum.
I don't expect him to. The only way I see this fight getting made is if Turkey pays for it, because he's the only one that's willing to overpay to make fights happen. The ones that need to.
Like this one.
I give Janibek Alimkhanuly the edge in that fight. I'm not overly impressed with Carlos Adames, the guys he's beaten, a faded Sergey Derevyanchenko that was coming off a loss, Juan Macias Montiel, whose claim to fame is losing to Jermall Charlo, and his more recent outing with Terrell Gachet that was forgettable and ho-hum.
Not overly impressed. At the same time, I'm not all that impressed with Janibek either.
But I give him the slight edge to win.
There's some great fights. We was offered the Canelo fight
What?
early this year. But I said, no, not yet.
For Hamza.
Yeah.
What, for
Good
May?
money.
Yeah.
Yeah, really good money.
Where would that have been, Frank?
That would have been
Vegas, wasn't it?
wherever.
So
But
that would have been the May fight in Vegas.
I don't know where it had been. It was just an offer was made. But
in Vegas, yeah.
We didn't know about
I
that.
didn't know about that.
there you
No
know
one
now.
did.
Yeah.
Very random, but myself and Frank didn't even have this discussion. I let him run with what he said because I back what he said. Too soon, yeah, definitely.
I think that's what his plan was, to try and catch you now, because there's a lot of kind of hype building around you now.
No, I don't know. I'm surprised he even knew who I was, to be fair, bro. In all honesty, but 2 years from now, you heard it. Sheeraz versus Canelo is a very, very high possibility. I need to not look ahead, but that's a long-term goal of mine. Long-term goal of mine to win a few titles at 160, potentially unify, and then go up to 168.
Somebody else would have told me this, I would have dismissed it. It's just hearsay and a means for Frank Warren to promote his prized stallion in the middleweight division by attaching his name to Canelo. But then I remembered Canelo was in talks to fight Chris Eubank, another Brit, another middleweight.
Suddenly, this didn't seem so far-fetched. That Canelo Alvarez might have approached these guys to fight Hamza Sheeraz?
I mean, if he knows who Chris Eubank Jr. is, then Hamza Sheeraz ain't nothing but a walk down the street.
Down the block.
Same neighborhood, you're shopping around for British middleweights to bring up to super middleweight to defend your titles. And I have to be honest, as big a fan of Canelo as I am, if he did in fact approach these guys, if his people are the ones who pitched this idea that he should fight a greenhorn like Hamza Sheeraz, those are very bad optics. That is not a good look. Hamza's talented. He has a future. But this is a guy who hasn't even fought for a world title yet. What are you looking at him for?
What?
You would be so obviously in search of the low-hanging fruit to target a Hamza Sheeraz over some other fighters, many of which are at your weight and above.
Give me a Mabili before a Sheeraz. He's right there at 168 with Canelo. I believe he's in line to challenge him for one of his alphabet titles. Give me Mabili over Sheeraz.
Melakuziev over Sheeraz. Benavidez over Sheeraz.
If you have time, if you have interest in fighting a Hamza Sheeraz, show that interest in somebody more adept to the task.
I'm a big fan of Canelo Alvarez, and I'm not a fan of David Benavidez. But I don't want to see Canelo versus Sheeraz. Before that, I would like to see Canelo versus Benavidez.
I don't begrudge Hamza turning down this fight.
Because he's right. He'd need another 2 years at least to be ready for a fight like that. We don't even know if he's going to win a middleweight title, let alone super middleweight titles.
Come on.
Now, some would say that based on what he's done so far, Canelo Alvarez is already a first ballot Hall of Famer. That if he retired right here and right now, he's guaranteed a spot in the Hall of Fame. And based on that, whatever he's doing now is just side missions, bonus rounds, extra credit, because his Hall of Fame ticket is punched. I agree with that, I do, but that doesn't make it right.
Targeting a green guy like that?
Hamza's green. He hasn't fought for a full-fledged alphabet title yet. For targeting a guy like that at middleweight, target the guys at super middleweight. So when you're not interested in a David Benavidez fight, and you're non-committal to a Terence Crawford fight, that you would target a greener fighter, a much greener, less experienced fighter than they are, those are very bad optics, even for Canelo.
I'm a huge fan of the guy, but I can't justify that. If he really approached Frank for a fight with Hamza?
It just looks bad.